Today we're going to talk about advanced block development. So I don't know how many of you are attending training after taking the basic block development course, but this one builds on that, and we're just going to go through some advanced block development. So without further ado, let's get to it. So I've got a concrete5 site, and the first thing that I want to talk about is fixing a problem that happens fairly frequently when you're dealing with blocks that have rich media as a part of them, or so something like a flash, or a video player, or a rich user experience. So perhaps something that uses JavaScript or something along those lines. Because concrete5, its user interface is heavily JavaScript based. Sometimes an interface might work just fine when you're viewing it in the page, but it may not work so great when it's trying to render the edit bar along with the block, or when you're trying to actually edit a page and mouse over content on the page, stuff like that. So a perfect example of this is the Google Maps block. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through that block and show you what kinds of problems it could potentially have and how we solve those. So here is concrete5 site, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a Google Maps block to this page. This is a block that we have in the core, so if you want to see how we've done some of the stuff, you can check it out there. I'm going to put in the location of our office. So as I publish my edits and leave edit mode, you can kind of see this is how the Google Maps block looks when you're actually viewing it. There's a fair amount of interaction happening in here, and if you were to edit this page and try to actually mouse over the content on your page, things like that, it could be a little bit tough, because this JavaScript is catching clicks, it's doing all sorts of stuff in this iframe that then concrete5 wants to put overlays on top of and things like that, and sometimes the JavaScript that we load when we're in edit mode conflicts pretty mightily with the JavaScript that these components load. And this is also the case with certain Flash video, because I don't think it's the case anymore, but at one point I recall Internet Explorer used to put all of its plugins as like they were the absolute top component with the Z index on top, so there would be no way to actually put concrete5's the sort of overlay that we have when you're in edit mode, this darkened div, it would never be able to be on top of those components. So we learned pretty quickly that we had to have a mechanism by which people could disable content when it was in edit mode in order to do this. So as you can see, we've done that with the Google Maps block. You can see this text, Google Map disabled in edit mode. And so I can click it, I can work with it, but when I leave edit mode, the map is back where it needs to be. And if you mess around with the video block or blocks like that, you'll see a similar approach. So this is how we do that. If I go into the concrete blocks folder and I find the Google Map block, this is all taking place within the Vue PHP layer. There's no special layer there's no special script for this. However, that might be kind of nice. If you go into vue.php, you can see how we do this. It's very simple. The first bit of code that we use is we retrieve the current page that the block is on. So that's what this does. Page get current page. If you see code throughout concrete5 that looks like this, global C, that's the sort of old school, less approved approach toward getting the current page. This is the nicer way of doing that. But this gets you the current page that this block is on, and then the next line checks to see whether that page is in edit mode. And the way that function works is it actually checks a few different things. It checks to see whether it's checked out to anyone, which will return yes if it's in edit mode. But it also checks to see whether is edit mode only returns true if the current user viewing the page is actually the one editing it. So, you know, if I actually am editing a page like this, if someone else comes along to the page, even if they have edit access, they will actually see the map, because it only edit mode is only true if we're actually in a mode where you can mouse over stuff and click to get the menus when you're actually editing. So if that green fade is happening over the button up there. So is edit mode checks to see whether I am actually editing the page, and so then we just have this div right there. You can see this is pretty simple. We could actually put anything we want in here. Excuse me. We could actually put anything we want in there. We just settled on a convention whereby we put a div with a special class, CCM edit mode disabled item, and that actually takes care of drawing the border around this box, making the box gray, giving it the right typography. And then we style it to be a certain height. And then we put Google Map disabled in edit mode. And what we do here is the dimensions for this stuff, the height in this case, although it could be width as well, we try and make it, this is not required, but this is a nice thing to try to shoot for. We try to make the dimensions of this outer box here actually match the dimensions of what the content looks like when it's not disabled. So Google Map, you can see down here, this is the stuff that is put into the view if it's actually being rendered. And you can see the Google Map canvas style is 100% width, so that's why we don't have any width up here, because it's going to just span the entire content of the page, or its container div rather. And then here the map is going to always be 400 pixels high, so that's why we have this be 400 pixels. And that's why when you exit edit mode, you can see that these things are roughly the same size, and we do that so that the page doesn't shift around a whole bunch when you're actually working, when you're actually going in and out of edit mode. And you can see that at play with some other stuff. If I look at the video player, we've got another bit of CCM edit mode disabled item. But here we're actually making this edit mode disabled class. We are actually giving it a specific width and height that corresponds to the width and height of the video that we are placing. So when I'm actually working with video player block, I have to, I don't have any video files for this demo, but whatever you put here for the width and height, we not only use that to display the video, we also use it to control the dimensions on that disabled mode div. So that's how that works. It's it relies on the developer actually coding it in there, and you don't necessarily always need to do that. If you're working with static content, you certainly don't. Even a lot of the times, if you're working with a slideshow, or there's plenty of stuff that even though it does use interaction and it does use JavaScript, it works just fine when concrete5 is in edit mode. And so we'd encourage people to not use this if they don't need to, but if you do, it's an easy way to work with it. And I'm not sure if the Google Maps block does this, but You could even make it so that we only include certain JavaScripts in the header of the page if the page is in edit mode as well. And moving right along, you know, in a similar vein to this, but not necessarily in edit mode, we had this particular solution in place in the core for a while because we noticed it. But then, at a certain point, we added the concrete5 scrapbook. And the scrapbook, which has actually become the clipboard at this point. If you you can see this if you click on a block and you look down here, we have copied a clipboard, and then there's a little message that says the block's been copied to a clipboard. If you then click down here and click paste from clipboard, you can see here's a bunch of different. That doesn't look so great. Here's a bunch of different blocks that you have actually copied into the clipboard. So if I do that with the content block, I paste from clipboard, I can actually see all these different blocks. And you click on this guy over here, and you can cut and paste stuff. And that's how the clipboard works. Well, when we introduced this feature, it was funny. We got a bug report back that looked pretty bad. Someone said that every time they went into the clipboard, anytime they went to paste from clipboard, their screen just became white. And that was a little bit disconcerting. We wondered why that was, and we kept messing around because we could not reproduce that bug. And it turns out that it wasn't a bug specifically with the clipboard. It was they had cut and pasted a Google Map block into the clipboard, and then they attempted to paste it from the clipboard. And well, the trouble is when you're viewing something in the clipboard, you're not actually in view mode, or you're not actually in edit mode necessarily. So it wasn't. What was happening was when you went to paste from clipboard, it would just render the block's view the same way it would in the page. And the problem was we had already rendered a Google Map block on the page and included certain JavaScripts. And so what happened was the same JavaScript attempted to run again, and it caused the whole page to go white because JavaScript failed. It didn't like being Google Maps did not like being run twice in one page load. So what we did was we needed a way to have different view layer, a different view layer for the clipboard versus not. So we implemented that. So now if you actually paste from the clipboard, you can see the Google Map block is here at the top, and it looks quite a bit different than the map block on the page. It doesn't just say disabled in edit mode. It actually gives you some relevant information, like test title, the title of the block. It gives you the latitude and longitude, which is not that useful, but we put it up there just because we could. It also gives you the location of what you had in there, and if you click that to add it, we're going to probably have major problems if I keep that in there, though. And the way we accomplish this is not actually in the view.php file. This is a separate file in the block directory that you can optionally include called scrapbook.php. And this is super simple. This works the exact same way that view.php works. All the same variables that are automatically in the scope of this file when automatically in the scope of view.php when it is rendered are automatically in place here. So it really works just like it's just an alternate view that is automatically loaded when the block is shown in the scrapbook, which is quite handy. And you can see this kind of comes in handy in a few different situations. So let's say I have an HTML block. I add this HTML in there. this is straight HTML, so it's going to run this way. And if I copy this to the clipboard and I go to paste from the clipboard, you can see that the HTML block has a scrapbook layer that is meant to combat some of the same problems that the Google Map block had. So somebody found that they were cutting and pasting snippets with JavaScript all over their site, and the clipboard was failing because the JavaScript was all just running in this overlay, and that was causing all kinds of problems. So the HTML block, when it is in scrapbook mode, calls a function from within the HTML block controller called XML highlight. And you can see how that works if we just look into the XML. And this is just a simple utility function that makes XML look pretty. So you have a lot of flexibility with the clipboard like that. And we've tried to make it so that if you run into these types of problems, it should be pretty easy for them to be solved. I'm going to take this opportunity to ask if there are any questions and to close some of my open windows. Well, since it doesn't appear that there are, I am going to move right along. The next thing that I want to talk about is a little bit of block validation. So in the previous course, we talked a bit about auto.js. This is a JavaScript. This is JavaScript that automatically runs when a block is when a block's add or edit layer is when a block's add or edit layer is loaded. So you can see auto.js working in any number of different blocks. And since it's used for all sorts of different stuff, we're not getting rid of it anytime soon. But we also used to use it strictly for, or well, not strictly, but we used to use it primarily for block validation. So in the image block, you can see that if I click add here, I get an error that says you must select an image. And what's actually happening is auto.js runs, when blocks are submitted, CCM validate block form, whatever the last one of those defined will automatically run. And so this is running right here. It's checking to see, it's using jQuery to check to see if a particular input field has a value, and if it doesn't, it is adding an error here. And CCMT is just a way of, that's just a translation function. So within the image block controller, there's a function called get JavaScript strings that maps a key to a translated string. And the way that, since the way we handle translation, makes sure that any string wrapped in T in PHP will automatically get included into a translation file. And that's why we do that here, instead of actually just typing English here. But we could do that if we wanted to. Oh, Google, why are you so slow? switching out themes because that Google theme or that plain yogurt or Greek yogurt was being very slow loading its assets from Google and slowing us up. So now you can see if I add an image from here, I click add, it says you must select an image, dummy. That's because this JavaScript is running. Well, you know, it's not hard to imagine why this isn't the ideal approach. Yeah, concrete5 is JavaScript, is very JavaScript based, so in theory having JavaScript based validation isn't that big of a problem, because if you have JavaScript disabled, you know, you're going to have a fair amount of problems using concrete5 as it is. But you know, to a developer, requiring JavaScript for validation and only having it on the client side seems wrong. Plus, more practically, it's a little bit it's strange to have to recode validation in different languages. So a perfect example of this is it might be nice to be able to check when you're validating whether the image block is submitting correctly, whether the file that's actually been chosen is an image. And there's no way really to do that in JavaScript. I mean, what we'd have to do is we have to write some sort of AJAX call that, you know, ran a script on the server side that returned whether or not the thing was JavaScript. It sounds like a mess. So what we really want is the ability to handle block validation on the server side without everything done, without having to make the client wait. The problem with this, for a while, prior to concrete5.4, every time you added a block in concrete5, the entire interface would refresh. So if I add a block here and I typed in content, what used to happen was the whole page would reload and you'd see your block at the bottom of the screen. And that worked, but is quite cumbersome. And moreover, if your submission failed for some reason, you would have to somehow reload all of the windows that you had open in the session, or it wouldn't be a very compelling thing, because then you would have suddenly lost all of your content. And so obviously that wasn't going to work. So we, for the longest time, just didn't have server-side validation. But now, with in concrete5.4, we went to a sort of AJAX model where when you click add, it actually submits behind the scenes and inserts the block into the document right where you added it. And that actually makes it possible for us to have server-side validation, because if adding the block fails, all the same windows are still open, everything still works. So in concrete5.4, we introduced server-side block validation that is very easy for you to add to your own blocks. And I can show you an example of a core block which has it. So when you add a file block to a page, the file block, for those who don't use it, is just a simple way to link to a file in our file manager with a link. So if I click add here, you can see that I've got the little spinner, and then this pops up. You must select a file. You must give your file a link. This is not done through JavaScript. This is actually done through server-side block validation. And you can see how it works here. In the file block controller, we have defined a function called validate. This is an optional function. It runs prior to running save, so you don't have to build this into save. You don't have to define validate or save if you don't need them. You can define one but not the other, etc. It's a completely separate function. It takes one parameter, which is the post arguments. So this is primarily going to be the post array, but it's also whatever array you're passing to the save function. And we did this way so that you can actually run the validate functions from within blocks if you're scripting them as well. It's not just meant to be run through the interface. You could actually run this. You could run this in the in your own custom routines as well. The first line in this is going to be pretty standard for all of them. You're going to have to use the concrete5 validation error helper, and that's what this is. That's what's loading here. This creates an object. The error helper is really just a standardized way of holding errors and then passing them around. So, you know, if you've ever done any PHP development, I'm sure you've probably wrestled with different ways of reporting errors to users, etc. So maybe you've stored them in an array, and then you loop through the array and print out the errors, or you have an object somewhere. The error helper really just has a couple methods in it, like add, and then it's got a output list or a get list function. It's really just a standardized way of holding errors in it. But we use it all throughout Concrete5. And in the dashboard, it's kind of built into the dashboard base controller. So if you use the built-in error helper, it'll automatically show the errors in the dashboard page, that type of stuff. And so that's what this is here. And then these next lines are the two conditionals that we see being acted on here. So the first one is just checking to see whether the file ID that is being passed through the post is a valid one. So since I haven't selected a file, I get a null or a 0, and that's why the error object gets you must select a file added to it. And then we also check to see whether file link text is set to nothing, and that's just the name of this input element here. So this is all super simple stuff. And you can see how this is working here. If so, since I've added another error here, if I go back and add, you can see I get this error immediately. So this is all happening on the server. It can happen without changing any of the content on the page. You know, you can do this now. Since I've actually selected link text, that error with telling me that I need to specify a name for a link for the file is gone because it is no longer failing. But I still have to select a file, and I still get this error. So if I then select a file from the file manager, click add, it still says this will never work because I will always be adding to the error object. And that's sort of the next thing that I want to get across here. The validate function is meant to return an error object in all cases. So you don't have to worry about only returning it if it has errors. You can return it if it has no errors, and it is checked at the time of it's checked in another process. So you don't have to worry about writing code that checks to see. You don't have to worry about returning true or false or anything like that. You just worry about loading up errors if there are cases where errors should be loaded in there, and then and then pass the object back whether it has errors or not. So since I got rid of that, and this is filled with stuff, if I click add now, it loads in just fine. And this, of course, also works in edit mode as well. So block level validation, very simple to do in Concrete5 4 and above. And since it's PHP, you know, you can do all sorts of different stuff. You can check to see whether everything gets you know, it's PHP. So if I take a look at the Google Map block again, you can see that validate is working here. We're checking to see whether zoom is numeric, although this is actually not the best way for us to be checking this. We should probably be checking whether it's an integer, and it's you know, this actual case could be written better. But what's interesting about this is if I had to look at this, you could also, if you really wanted to, we have a function in this block that looks up the latitude and longitude based on an address, and it uses Google's geocoding to do that. What I might even say that we should do is, instead of doing this in the save function, we should move this up into the validate function and throw an error if it can't find the address, because that would be pretty key, and you might want to know at that point whether it could find the address.